Hey, what is up everybody? Paul here. If you are new to this channel, you are in good company because I am new to this channel too. This is my fourth video and I have been slowly but surely acquainting myself with this process of creating videos and I've been learning a lot and have decided it's now time to start reining in the focus of the channel to what it was ultimately intended to be about, which is music performance, and in particular addressing those challenges that rise up as we are given opportunities to perform or mandates to perform in some cases. So performance anxiety and stage fright, all of the various names to describe this phenomenon of freezing and having memory lapses and having our fingers freeze up and just being in a state of utter panic when we're faced with the possibility of performing. This is something that I struggled with and was completely incapacitated by for pretty much all of my life, from the time I was playing piano recitals when I was a kid, all the way through my adult years when I started playing guitar in college. And all of the opportunities that I've had to play have not been enjoyable. They were very painful. And I tried so hard to push myself into the fire, as it were, thinking that, it's kind of like exposure therapy. The more you do it, the easier it gets. That's what everybody says. The more you put yourself in the situations that are uncomfortable, the more comfortable you get there, and eventually you spread your wings and fly off into the sunset. That was not my experience. It was not my experience at all. It seemed that the harder I pushed, the worse the experience was. The more I prepared, the more anxious I became and the more fragile I was. And so this changed for me about 7 years ago now. And there was an unlocking move that really awakened me to the fact that much of what I was dealing with was related to trauma. Now, this isn't everybody's story, but I think it is something that goes unrecognized many times when you're dealing with anxiety. What's called anxiety in a general sense is anxiety, but if you look under the hood, there's actually a lot more going on there. And to try to work with it as though it were your garden variety anxiety is not going to get you very far. So there's a whole conversation there on trauma that we'll be getting into elsewhere. But since then, I have done a lot of work and explored a lot of different things and delved into the world of performance psychology and into all kinds of interesting things from east to west, Jungian shadow work and breath work, somatics. And in the past year, I've had the opportunity to really start leaning into my music again. And I was playing open mics pretty much every week for a while and have now jumped into some paid gigs and conversations alive with a guitar player and a bass player to create a little ensemble, and things are looking up. And the main point here, the most important point here, is the fact that I have come to enjoy the experience of performing. And this was my goal. This is what I've always known was my goal. It's not to be the best musician. It's not to be the best performer. It's to enjoy myself performing in the same way that I see other performers enjoying themselves when they're playing. They have some nerves, they have some anxiety, but they push through that, and once they get in the flow, and you can see it happen on stage. You can see when they start to find their groove and they are able to be alive and present in the experience of making music and sharing that experience with the people who are listening. And that's a magical thing to be a participant of as an audience member, but it's even more magical to be a participant in that as a musician, as I have come to find. And so what I am looking to do now is help other people who have been struggling with these same kinds of things. For the past 4 months, 5 months, I've been working on building out a product that is intended to help people who are struggling to cross that threshold and find comfort and enjoyment on stage in front of an audience. The program is going to be called the HearthKeeper System or the HearthKeeper Protocol. I'm still getting comfortable with that kind of language, but that is the kind of language that these things ultimately need to be packaged in to reach the people who need them. So that is coming soon. It's in the works. Hopefully in the next month or so, I'll be able to provide more information. But in this video, what I want to do is walk you through the 3 main principles that form the backbone of this program. And these are all based on my own journey and the things that I've drawn from all of these various places, these resources that I have tapped into over the years to find my way through the quagmire. All right, so the first phase of the journey is what I'm calling the guardian of the flame. And this is based on the principle of self-acceptance, radical self-acceptance. We oftentimes skip past this and jump right to the process of trying to create structure and to stabilize our playing through practice, through a kind of rigor of focusing in on developing the skill that we need to bring to bear, with the idea that if we can just make that as stable as possible, that it will stay intact when we go up on stage. And what that results in is, in the best case scenario, a kind of reproduction of the music, a kind of sterile rendering that isn't very spontaneous, it's not very authentic, it's not very expressive, and it's not very enjoyable. It's something where you've got the mechanics down and you go and you reproduce the mechanics and then you check the box and, you know, I did the performance and there it is. And while you certainly can get through the process with this, it is not as satisfying or enjoyable as the alternative, which we'll be ultimately getting to. The worst case scenario is that the holding it together approach is so brittle that it just falls apart, and you end up falling apart on stage and you feel embarrassed and angry and demoralized. And you now have one more reference point in your experience that tells you that you can't perform, or that you're no good at performing, or that you struggle with performance. So it's, in either case, it's really not ideal. So what we want to do is we want to rectify the rigidity and the brittleness with this self-acceptance. The self-acceptance softens everything. So before we try to really dial in preparation and practice, we want to make sure that we are coming from a place of real self-love and have developed a capacity to be comfortable with our imperfections. Now, this is a process. It's not something that happens overnight, but it is something that once you understand, once you get the feel for what this is all about, you can actually develop this pretty rapidly. And the understanding here is that we are oftentimes trying to push into a performance space from a place of trying to prove something, or trying to maintain on an unconscious level our sense of belonging. This is really at the core of a lot of our anxiety, is that on a deep animalistic level, we feel that if we fail, if we flop, if we show that we suck or that we bomb or whatever happens, that we will be rejected in a sense. And again, this is an unconscious animal brain kind of thing. And this fear of rejection, this fear of excommunication is so primal for us as humans, because in our early ancestral days, if you were excommunicated from the tribe, you were sure to perish. And so there's a certain kind of survival instinct and a self-preservation instinct that is baked into the calculus, again, from the unconscious, as we're considering the prospect of going up on stage. And so our culture doesn't really help us with this. We live in such a hyper-individualized culture that teaches us essentially that music is a skill that we develop in isolation. And then rather than being a communal, fun expression that everybody participates in, it's instead kind of an ego test where you are getting up and proving something, or there's a kind of a pass-fail component to it. So the cards are oftentimes stacked against us in our culture in terms of feeling comfortable that our identity is not at stake when it comes to how we do in a performance situation. So what this principle of self-acceptance and various practices and reflections and exercises around this, what this does is it allows us to be who we are without having to try to fix it or change it. We decouple the sense of self from the sounds of the music that we are experiencing as we're playing them. And so we allow ourselves to really be fully present without the kind of tensing and reactivity, the cringe factor, because as soon as we think about performance when we're playing, we're not just with the music, we're also imagining what somebody else is going to be hearing. We have an imaginary audience. And if there is this sense that the audience is going to be judging us as a person with respect to the music that we're making, then that's where this kind of stuff gets activated. So self-acceptance, radical self-acceptance, is this process whereby we allow ourselves to stay fully present, this flame of presence. This is why it's the guardian of the flame. It's a flame of presence that stays with the music and with the practice, with the process, without being squeezed out by this expectation of what other people are going to think about us. All right, so that's the guardian of the flame phase. That's the principle of self-acceptance. This is the space in which we defrag, where the fragmentation and the disconnection that results in this efforting and this trying and this forcing and the tension, where that all begins to kind of soften, and through this presence, there's a kind of a unification that takes place. All of this is okay, and all of this begins to function more in coherence and wholeness. So once there's a kind of critical mass, where there's a kind of a tipping point, there's a softening, there's okay, yeah, I feel good about this phase of the journey. Then we switch into the second phase, which is what I'm calling the HearthKeeper phase. So the HearthKeeper is all about the hearth as the structural, stable support that supports the home ultimately, but it supports the space. It creates a safe, contained space for that flame to stay alight, and a safe space around that flame for family and play and connection and all of the rest. But it's the stability of that structure that needs to stay intact so that all of that other kind of softer energy can be permitted to exist. The HearthKeeper is based on the principle of self-trust. So once we've established a deep sense of self-acceptance, we know on a felt sense the performance is always acceptable. The way that we show up, how we are, who we are, is always acceptable as we are. So whether or not we make a mistake, we can know we've made a mistake. It's not that we're blind to the fact that we've made mistakes, but it doesn't, the flame doesn't waver, you know. The flame stays steady. We stay steady. As soon as that becomes more and more established, then we can start developing self-trust. So here we start talking now about preparation and practice. And we begin very incrementally, very gradually exposing ourselves to increasingly stressful performance situations. So this is something that'll be a part of the program. And the goal here is to start getting some reps in of seeing your capacities staying online, whatever it is that typically goes offline, whether it's memory lapses, whether your voice seizes up, your hand seizes up, you can't find any words to say, whatever the case may be, just the overall experience of being so gripped with tension that you can't actually experience the joy of the moment. Whatever the case may be, we incrementally bring ourselves into performance contexts that allow us the opportunity to actually bring the preparation into the hot seat and see that it holds itself together. Now, in the beginning, certainly my experience in the beginning, jumping into an open mic setting, which is kind of a middle level, you know, experience in terms of the intensity. We can start at a less extreme situation. But for me, knowing that my goal was to experience the connection with the music and the presence with the music and to be in the music in the same way that I was when I was playing it on my own, in the beginning, I would only get glimpses of this. You know, if I had a set of 3 or 4 songs, there may be, you know, 2 of those songs where for 10 or 15 seconds, I felt like I was really in the music and that I was really present to the experience and that I was really, you know, I was really there. And those then begin to kind of expand out. So because I had done the self-acceptance work, when I made mistakes, when the wheels fell off the bus, when I crashed and burned, it was not that big of a deal because there was always a safe landing. I always landed on my feet. It was never a big deal. I remember one experience where I was playing these 2 songs back to back. I didn't warm up beforehand. I didn't have any time to practice beforehand. Didn't have an opportunity to practice beforehand. So that was part of it, no preparation. But it was a great experience. These are great experiences too, you know, jumping into a low stakes environment like this and a very friendly, supportive group of people. But I had 2 songs that were both in drop D tuning. And my muscle memory just jumped me into, one song was in the key of A, and so I was going to an E shape with the drop D tuning. This is where I should have been going. But instead, I was going to a G chord in the drop D tuning because that was the chord in the next song that was also in that tuning. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out what I was doing. I went back and restarted the verse like 3 times, and every time my hand would go to that G shape. And I'm like, I don't even know. I don't even know. And I just pulled the plug in the middle of the song. And this is an open mic that is at a restaurant. You know, more than half the people in the audience are not part of the open mic. They're just there, you know, enjoying the music, or not so much enjoying the music. And so, you know, it's those kinds of things. But with the self-acceptance piece, there isn't this, I mean, it's one of the positive side effects of that is you don't have this extended period of time of self-loathing and misery associated with it. The rebound is very quick. And so you can recover from mistakes. If they're less catastrophic than this, you recover much more quickly. But all of that is to say, the experience then becomes one where the ratio of time where you feel like you're online and where you have access to your capacities, you're playing the things that you've practiced in the way that you practice them. You've been working something up in particular, and you're able to nail it in a performance setting. Despite the pressure, you're able to still do the thing. You're able to hold it together. That's what self-trust is all about. It's about being able to trust that when you take that leap of faith, that trust fall into a performance, which is really what that is. You just are falling into an experience and trusting that everything's going to be okay. Now, on a deep level, you know everything's going to be okay because you've got the self-acceptance. But obviously, as a musician, you want to give a good performance. You want to do justice to the music. You want to bring it, you know, you want to bring it and bring it in a way that it does the music justice. So the self-trust piece is about trusting in our preparation. It's about trusting in our practice and trusting that we're going to be able to hold it together when we're up on stage. So that is the whole second stage of the journey. We talk a lot about this idea of discipline and how more fundamental to discipline is devotion, that this is a devotional practice. In the very beginning of the program, we'll be really delving into your why. What is your why behind playing music? You know, what lights you up? Why do you love music? Why are you wanting to do this? Why do you want to get up and play in front of people, right? There's something that's alive there. And when we learn how to pull from this why, that pull is what pulls us into the practice. It's what pulls us into the process. It's very different than how we typically think of discipline and how we typically, certainly I, would enforce discipline on myself, which is a pushing. I push myself to do something. I would push myself to practice. I would push myself to do the thing that I was trying to be disciplined about. And sometimes you do have to push yourself. This is Angela Duckworth's work on grit. She talks about how grit is one of these key differentiators between successful and happy people. But she also points out that you don't fuel your car engine with grit. You're not operating on grit all the time. Grit is something that you pull out every once in a while as needed. And it's the same kind of thing with discipline. On the daily, the thing that is pulling us into our practice is this sense of devotion. It's a devotional crucible that we are getting pulled into because we found this alignment with the why behind what it is that we're doing, and ultimately with our aspirations, with what we're aspiring to do with our music. So that is the general overview, kind of a 30,000-foot view of the HearthKeeper phase. So we now have this powerful combination of self-acceptance, which through the crucible of performance becomes transformed into something even deeper and even more powerful, which is self-belonging. And this is really the antidote to the FOPO, the fear of other people's opinions of us. This real deep sense of, man, if I mess this up, then this is how I'm going to be perceived. There's this kind of shame dynamic oftentimes. Something's wrong with me. And when we've really deeply internalized through this fire of devotional practice and regular performance, we learn to come to realize that we really don't need other people's opinions about how we're playing to define whether or not we belong. We belong unto ourselves. That's a really powerful thing. And this brings into focus another conversation that we won't really get into here, but it's the relationship between domain-specific mastery, in this case music, and self-mastery, and the relationship between finding mastery as a process, not as a final place to be arrived at, but as a process of mastery. We find that as we develop mastery in that domain, it brings about a kind of mastery within ourselves that then translates to other areas of our life. So when we do find this, what my friend and mentor Alex Brankoff would call the unfuckwithable core, when you have cultivated a primal core that is now very much alive and strong and confident and has this kind of buoyancy that is something that belongs unto itself, it sets the temperature in the room. It doesn't get affected by other people's temperatures in the room. And then you develop the competency with your music to be on stage and actually express from that presence. This is the light of the presence in the first stage that you are now expressing through the music. It becomes a very powerful thing. It becomes a very meaningful thing and a very enriching thing. And so that is what I want to bring people into. And then the final stage really takes care of itself. This is something that the program is going to just tee somebody up for. It is the Torchbearer phase. So we started with the Guardian of the Flame, and then the HearthKeeper phase, the self-trust, the cultivation of the actual craft of our musicianship, stabilizing that structure. And then finally we have the Torchbearer. So now you have this self-trust, you have this capacity to stand up and step out. And now the question is, what are you going to do with it? What is your heart wanting from you? It's kind of like, in the beginning, I like to think about the self-acceptance as putting your faith in love. So you can't, in the beginning, put your faith in your competency because you haven't really developed the competency yet to perform. But you can put your faith in love. You know that no matter how you land, no matter how you fail to meet whatever expectations you had of yourself, if you put your faith in self-acceptance and self-love, then no matter what, everything's always okay. So you begin putting your faith in love, and then she puts her faith in you. And then the question is, what are you going to do with it? You know, now you have this capacity to stand up, to step out. How are you going to bring that into the world? And that is really ultimately what this is all about. I believe very strongly from the bottom of my heart that the world right now needs you to bring your light and share it and shine it. It seems like your little corner of the world is relatively small, but I guarantee you that the impact is profound. And if you are feeling the calling, if you're feeling an urge, you feel a desire to perform, I feel like it's really important that you pay attention to that and find a way to see it through. If you found any of this interesting, you can support this channel by hitting the subscribe button. That also indicates to the algorithm that other people who have the same kinds of interests as you, who would benefit from something like this, that they maybe should see this video as well. So it'd be greatly appreciated, and we will see you next time around.